Hello and welcome to today's MZ webinar, where we are going to talk about how to measure the economic value of apprenticeships. And today we are going to introduce our new Apprenticeship Economic Impact Study. And to best do that, I'm delighted to be joined on today's webinar by Adam Sangster from Leeds City College, who were the first college in the UK to undertake the MZ Apprenticeship Impact Study. And Adam's going to talk a little bit about their experiences of the new apprenticeship reality, the new apprenticeship playing field, and how they are planning on using the economic impact study to help them with their work. So a little bit about what we're going to cover today. Now, by way of introduction, for those of you who don't know MZ very well, we have a real burning passion to help make the connection between education and labour markets and economic development and economic prosperity. In fact, it's the core reason why we exist. And as a matter of fact, if we take a quick look at the potted history of MZ, and please excuse some US spellings on this slide, we actually see that the economic impact study was the first thing that MZ ever did. And it's remained vitally important to everything we do right around the globe. And since the early 2000s, we've been continuing to refine and develop our economic impact models for various education systems around the world and for various reasons, whether that be for apprenticeships or adult education or higher education or 16 to 18 full-time education. And it remains a big part of what we do. And we are delighted that we've now refined and added to our economic impact modelling such that we can focus in and measure the economic impact of apprenticeships. So if we turn then to apprenticeships, why is it so important to be able to demonstrate economic value and economic impact? And why did we here at MZ decide to put a lot of investment and time and effort into working out how to do this to the best of our capabilities? Well, firstly, we've had all of these big changes to the apprenticeship system over the past few years, which I'm sure you all are familiar with and are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And there are various agencies involved in that, of course, some of which we see on the screen right now. And coupled with that, and perhaps more importantly, because of our current work in the further education sector in the UK, we already work with hundreds of UK FE colleges. So we have that ongoing dialogue with the sector who have been talking to us over the past couple of years about particular aspects of this new system and the new apprenticeship reality, and have highlighted some areas that have been causing them concern or have meant that they are having to work and operate slightly differently, or that they're having to think about new ways of doing things, which perhaps they haven't had to in the past. And some of those that have came up most commonly are here on the screen. We hear a lot about new providers getting in on the apprenticeship playing field. We hear a lot about competitive tendering and a different way of procuring and attracting apprenticeship business for colleges. We've heard a number of examples from our friends in colleges about having to talk to new, different people at employers who they might have had relationships with for a number of years. But because of the new levy system, for example, they're having to talk to people in centralized finance or centralized HR teams, and are having to explain why the college is a good bet for apprenticeships, as opposed to all of these new providers that are out there trying to get in on the game. And then, of course, other audiences, such as parents, young people themselves who are considering whether to go down the apprenticeship route, LEPs, other representative bodies that you guys, I'm sure, deal with all of the time, and just a desire to be able to demonstrate why your college is a good bet and a safe bet for apprenticeships in language over and above the typical measures that you guys are able to talk about, such as success rates and volumes and all of the different relationships you have. What the MZ Apprenticeship Economic Impact Study allows you to do is to talk in different terms, in terms that employers will be familiar with, and we'll come back to that later on in today's webinar. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over the microphone to Adam from Leeds City College, who are one of our long-term partners in the sector and are the first college to have received the brand new MZ Economic Impact Study. And firstly, Adam, it would be really great for you to share some of your experiences of that in the apprenticeship world and some of the challenges that you faced, and perhaps why you felt that the MZ Economic Impact Study would be a good addition to what you're trying to do in the apprenticeship world.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Obviously, I think firstly, we know that apprenticeships has become a hugely competitive market, and it's any message that we can craft and any kind of data that we can get behind that message to encourage both businesses and learners to undertake an apprenticeship or have an apprentice with us is going to be something that's going to be really useful for us and give us that competitive advantage. We know nationally learner numbers have been in decline, and there's a huge amount of work to do to reach the 3 million apprenticeships by 2020. And we need those tools really to kind of increase employer engagement. Our LEP has a number of local schemes that are doing that, but again, having that evidence behind that is going to be something that's going to be really useful for us to get those kind of marketing and comms messages out there to our employers in the local area. We're having feedback from employers that the 1 day off the job training is a big barrier. They see that as a big loss in staff time, and some employers are really struggling with that idea. So again, any kind of data about the return on investment on that time is going to be really useful for us to help persuade those employers into doing an apprenticeship with us, which is going to be really useful. Thankfully, I think over the last year, employers are generally starting to get a bit more of an idea of what the levy is about. Initially, there was a lot of confusion, and we had to really go out and educate a lot of employers about the levy itself. But over the past year, we've seen that kind of decline, and they've understood it a little more, which has helped a lot. But it has increased expectations of employers. They're expecting bespoke training programs for us and really high quality candidates as well, which is obviously putting a lot of pressure on us. And then you've also got the parents and students who still don't fully understand what apprenticeships are. They're hearing a lot about it in the press, and they're not really aware of why it might be a better option for them than a full-time study program as well. So there's a range of things really that's kind of affecting us as an institution at the moment.
Thanks, Adam. That's really helpful and really interesting, and it certainly echoes with lots of the messages that we're hearing from other colleges as well. And we are certainly delighted that Leeds City College have been the first to go through the new model, which allows them to really get their hands on some interesting metrics, which we'll touch on shortly. And I will come back to Adam later on in today's webinar, where we'll hear from Adam about some of the more specific plans that Leeds City College might have for how they're going to use their Apprenticeship Economic Impact Study. So then, how do we go about measuring the economic impact of apprenticeships? Well, we have two methods of measurement. Firstly, we look at a return on investment. As Adam mentioned, this is a concept that employers are certainly familiar with, and we're all probably familiar with. We look at the costs and benefits related to apprenticeships, and we put a figure on that, specific to your college and specific to your region. And secondly, we look at economic growth. So what proportion and amount of added value in your local and regional economy can we attribute to the delivery of apprenticeships from your institution? So in our new Apprenticeship Economic Impact Study, we look at that return on investment from the perspective of apprentices themselves and your employers. And we look at the added economic growth expressed through increased earnings, increased productivity, specifically attributable to your apprentices. Now let me expand a little bit on that and talk a little bit more about how we do it and what we report on. So firstly, return on investment to apprentices. So what we do is we look at your apprentices right now and also historic volumes, and we consider the costs to those apprentices, which are things like the opportunity cost, or what they could have been earning if they'd gone straight into a job instead of attending college as an apprentice. We look at their material costs, any fees that they might have paid, any other travel costs, etc., etc. And then we consider the benefits derived by your apprentices, primarily how their future earnings are affected by going through an apprenticeship. And that, of course, will differ depending on their age, depending on the level of apprenticeship, depending on the sector pathway that they chose, and in fact, depending on where you are in the country and where they are in the country. Then if we think about return on investment to your employers, again, the costs to those employers are lots of obvious things like the wages that they pay to the apprentice, any fee or any levy contribution that they will have made, any materials, and also some of the kind of more or the less obvious things like what are the costs to them as a business for them releasing a manager or another member of staff to support and work alongside apprentices. We take all of that into account. And then benefits to the employers. Again, the obvious stuff like, well, what output does the apprentice give? What increased product is coming for your employers through their employment of apprentices? And how does that compare from a cost-based perspective on the cost of employing an apprentice versus the cost of employing another member of staff? Is it a relative lower cost? It usually is. And then if we think about that, the second measure, which is the economic growth, so what amount of money, what amount of added economic value can we attribute to your current and historic apprentices? Well, the benefits here are to the employers and the wider economy in terms of that wider economic output. So we put pounds and pence figures on that. What is the economic output that is likely to be derived from the individuals who have gone through an apprenticeship with you. And again, that will differ, of course, depending on their age, whether they actually achieved, what sector they were in, what pathway they were taking, whether it was a framework or a new standard or what have you, and how those particular sectors are operating in your region. We will look at increased output and productivity that otherwise wouldn't be gained. So we're not just assuming that because you've delivered hundreds of apprentices that this huge amount of economic growth has been derived that wouldn't have otherwise. What we're looking at really is identifying the added value, which is really important. And also we'll look at how the increased earnings and increased productivity and increased output coming from your local employers will then multiply through your local and regional economy. So if you have a big chunk of engineering apprentices, they will contribute to the economy in a certain way, and the money that engineering companies and engineering apprentices spend will flow through your economy in a particular way. And that will be slightly different to if you have a big chunk of business admin apprentices, because their employers will spend their money differently, and those business admin apprentices themselves will spend their money differently, and that will then flow through your local and regional economy differently. So it's very unique to your college, very unique to the portfolio of apprentices and their frameworks that you have right now and you've had historically. And that's really important because the EMSI Economic Impact Study for apprenticeships is very unique and bespoke to your institution, and that's really important to us. So you may have seen work recently that talks about the national impact of apprenticeships, which is fabulous work coming from London School of Economics and other people. We use a similar methodology, but the difference in what we do is that we're very specific to your college and specific to your portfolio, which when it comes to things like competitive tendering is very important because you need to be able to talk about what you guys do and what you guys have done historically and why your college is a safe bet and a good bet for investment in apprenticeships. So some typical findings, and these aren't findings from a live study. These are just dummy findings that we've created for the purposes of today's slides. So there we see, previously talked about return on investment from the perspective of apprentices and from the perspective of employers and your businesses, your business partners, and then of money that can be attributed as added value, extra economic growth that can be attributed to the volume of apprentices that you guys deliver right now and have delivered historically. So some pretty significant numbers which you could expect from a study, which I'm hoping you can see would be useful in some of those challenges that we talked about at the beginning, whether that be competitive tendering or direct negotiations with employers, or even direct negotiations with funding bodies and LEPs and etc., as well as having some really interesting stuff in here about why it's a good thing for a young person or an adult to undertake an apprenticeship, and why parents and their support network should be comforted by the apprenticeship route if that's the choice that is taken. So to round things out from a content point of view, I am going to hand the mic back to Adam at Leeds City College. And Adam, it would be really fabulous to hear about some of the specific plans that you guys might have for the use of your economic impact study findings when it's ready in the near future, and where you see that fitting in with your wider strategic work on apprenticeships, and indeed perhaps even your wider strategic work at the college.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, initially it's really key strategic information that's going to be very useful for us, like you say, when we're engaging with people like LEPs and other regional and local partners, and it's going to be kind of great information to kind of sell our apprenticeships and make people aware of what we do as a college, which is really important. But we were thinking about actually how can we use this data on an everyday level when we're talking to a new student or a new business, and how can we use that as a marketing message to bring them on board with us as a college. And we're really thinking about, we've been working with the MC team to break everything down into individual sectors. So we're going to have sector specific data and information, which we're going to kind of make some nice little handouts and obviously make it lovely and branded, and use that as a tool to actually talk to students who might not really understand how much of a boost to their career it might be. You know, you can say to a potential apprentice that the work experience is going to set you in great stead for your future career, or you can actually show them these figures and show them the evidence behind it. And this is what our students have done before in that sector. And I think that's quite a powerful message from a marketing point of view, being able to essentially show the student and indeed their influencers, the parents, that return on investment of the time they spend studying the apprenticeship. Equally, you're going to be talking to employers about return on investment as well. And we're going to be, again, looking at the employer data on a sector-specific level to really break down that and make it relevant to the employers that we're speaking to, so that we're not just talking kind of these big general figures, but we can actually relate it back, as I say, to the employers. And again, it's about being able to highlight that return on investment and use it as a tool in our marketing messages on the everyday level, I think, and embed it in a lot of the messages we're putting out there about apprenticeships, to really kind of provide the evidence and the backup to a lot of what we say about apprenticeships.
That's fabulous. It was really exciting when we heard and worked with Adam and the team at Leeds to kind of define how best to articulate some of these findings, and that sectoral pathway-based approach was really exciting. As Adam mentioned there, we've heard from friends and colleges in the sector who've said, you know, we might have to bid for a big chunk of public sector work in our area, and it would be great if we could kind of highlight the relevant pieces of our apprenticeship provision and what that return on investment is and what the economic growth attached to that is, which will be very different to if we're applying for a big national construction contract or a big engineering contract. And the ability to have both the kind of big overall structural number for the whole college, but also have the ability to then dig into sectors and different pathways is really exciting to us, and it's something that I think will add a lot of value through our work in this space. So that's essentially it for today's webinar. As well as the work I mentioned with Leeds City College, we also have our first group economic impact study running right now. So we have the ability to measure the impact of a collection of colleges and their partner organisations, which is also exciting to us as well. But next steps wise, it will be fabulous to speak to you all. I'll follow up with everyone who was registered and has attended today's webinar, and thanks so much for taking the time to do so. And I really look forward to speaking to you all individually about how this might work for your college and what you're trying to do. And again, finally, just a big thanks to Adam from Leeds City College for joining us and giving his input, which is really, really helpful and much appreciated. So thanks everyone for joining me today. I hope it's been useful, and I look forward to working with you and speaking to you more about your work in the apprenticeship space and how we can help you to measure the value of your apprenticeships.